founding President, Board of Directors, Emeritus, Federation of Burn Foundations, and James Burns, President, Firemen's Association of the State of New York.
Good afternoon,
Welcome.
Chairman Sweeney and the other members of the Assembly that are here. I come very close to being able to identify myself as a native of New York. I was born and raised in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, just 5 miles away, and I feel fortunate not to have been born long before all these chemicals came on that we've been hearing about today. And my first exposure to harmful chemicals probably resulted from the more liberal legislation in New York, which enabled me to enjoy trips over those few miles between the ages of 18 and 21 for some imbibing of those chemicals. It wasn't that long afterwards, only about a decade later, that I became involved with fire and burn injury. I was fortunate to join the staff of a hospital that had one of the first burn centers in Pennsylvania, and which formed a small foundation to support it, which enabled me to become very active quickly in the nascent organizations at the national level, which were umbrella groups for people interested in those problems, those being the Federation of Burn Foundations, which comprises about 40 small organizations, most of them regional, and the American Burn Association, which is the umbrella organization for the burn care professionals. Both of those organizations bring together not just burn care professionals or association directors like I was, but also firefighters who share our interest in fire and burn injury prevention. And this was in the 1970s. It was a very exciting time because all this was just beginning to develop, unfortunately, including the standard that resulted in the great proliferation of these harmful chemicals. But we in the burn injury field knew nothing about it at the time. I don't think there's any of us who can claim that we were aware of these standards and of the chemicals. We didn't know the term endocrine disruptor, and I can't speak for the fire service, who perhaps may have been a little more aware of it than we were, but certainly it was not a common interest in our umbrella organizations. Since that time, it was really only 4 or 5 years ago that we started to become aware of these issues. And it's since then, in particular, we've also become aware of the tactics of the industry that manufactures these chemicals, an industry that fights not just to protect and expand, but also to expand these standards. It seems like they feel that the best defense is a good offense. At about the same time, the industry, perhaps sensing that people were becoming aware of the problems, formed a barely disguised and now discredited front group, the Citizens for Fire Safety. And they tried to gain credibility very early on by exploiting the strong interest in injury prevention, really the passion of industry of the firefighter and burn injury communities, along with our lack of knowledge at the time of the hazards of these products. They did so quite blandly, claiming that they were working with the American Burn Association to improve fire safety. In fact, they were only attempting to associate their name with our professional organization. Short of that, you might have expected the industry's front group or its testimony to state legislatures to dramatize and personalize the product's effectiveness. But they produced no data. No statements have been forthcoming from firefighters they might have recruited, and only one anecdote about a fire where fire retardant supposedly saved lives by blocking flames. In that anecdote, a burned child was allegedly saved from more severe injury by a pillow infused with FR chemicals. The anecdote turned out, as the Chicago Tribune has reported, to be a fabrication concocted by a retired burn surgeon who the group had recruited to testify before several state legislatures. Now, we're going to leave testimony about the chemical hazards to the environmental and biological scientists. We believe what we bring to the table is our experience and our insight as to why fire and burn injuries have declined so substantially in recent decades. Hospitalization for burn injury has decreased from 90,000 to less than 40,000 since the early 1970s. Residential fire deaths have likewise declined more than 50%, from over 6,000 to around 3,000. The flame retardant industry would like the world, and state legislators in particular, to believe that its projects have played a major role in that decline. The fire scientists at the National Fire Protection Association, however, believe otherwise. They've reported that fire data are not detailed or complete enough to show whether or not adding flame retardant chemicals to have made any difference in furniture foam flammability. We know firsthand that burn injuries can be life-threatening, and they frequently leave behind physical and emotional scars that last a lifetime. Thus, we are deeply committed to fire and burn prevention, but through proper education and appropriate public policy. But unlike the profit motive of the industry, we also are willing to acknowledge the impact of broader social and economic trends on burn injury incidents, sometimes which have little to do with a conscious effort to prevent those injuries. This is going beyond those educational efforts and public policy efforts which have been very appropriate, such as the fire-safe cigarette legislation, which New York was given great credit as the origination of a law which is subsequently passed in all 50 states. But in regard to where these policies and educational programs have not necessarily been a key factor, take cigarettes, for example. They are the prime ignition source of fires ignited in upholstered furniture, but if you chart the decline in smoking with the decline in fire deaths over the past 40 years, their lines on the graph are almost identical. Health, financial, social, and sanitary reasons rank far above fire risk as a motivation for smokers to quit. Those who still smoke are increasingly forced outdoors, and the recent switch to fire-safe cigarettes should reduce their fire ignition propensity both indoors and out. Indoors, there is a much lower presence of the ignition sources for fires, which could spread from elsewhere to materials infused with flame retardants. In recent decades, for example, there's been a dramatic switch in hot food and beverage preparation in the home. We've shifted away from frying pans from which grease fires can spread to other rooms with those infused materials. Now we depend on prepared foods we can heat briefly in microwave ovens, which are governed by timers. Even more important, we've shifted much of our preparation and consumption to restaurants and takeout franchises. This is especially true for lower-income families with crowded housing conditions, the households that are most at risk of kitchen fires. In sum, the use of flame retardants in common consumer products increasingly resembles an unhealthy solution in search of a relevant problem. In this case, it's a problem that has been declining in recent decades for many reasons, in sharp contrast to the accelerating presence of these chemicals in our bloodstreams and those of our descendants. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney and others, for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Mr. Burns?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Jim Burns. I'm the president of the Firemen's Association of the State of New York, representing the nearly 90,000 volunteers statewide. My history in the fire service, I started in 1961, in a little town called Verplank, about 50 miles up the river from here near Peekskill. I've held every position within that department in the line offices up to chief of department and chairman of the board of fire commissioners. In 1995, I was appointed by then Governor Pataki to serve as state fire administrator, a position I served until January of '07. During that time, I was instrumental, through the help of Assemblyman Granis, in formulating the regulation on the low ignition propensity or fire-safe cigarette, which has been duplicated in all 49 other states in the nation of Canada and some other countries and the European Union. We're very proud of that fact, and as my co-panelist has noted, it has reduced flames, fires, and injuries and burns in this country and in other countries. The purpose of this hearing is to talk about flame retardants in children's clothing. And my first comment is any product that hurts children should be removed from the market voluntarily, or the government should ban it. FASNY trusts Department of Health and Environmental Conservation to do their job well. The State Department of Health assures us, though, that industry has access to flame retardant chemicals that are safe and cost effective. FASNY has supported legislation in the past that have banned chemicals that have been proven to be harmful, and we will continue to do that. However, we still have to rely on some of the science and hope that some of the flame retardants in the marketplace are still effective. Our bottom line is any product, Chairman Sweetie and Godford, you were asking an important question. Are flame retardant chemicals effective? In many respects, this is still an open question. Flame retardants exist in nearly every product that may be found in the home, from the plastics may be found in our televisions or cell phones, to the clothing that we wear, to the upholstery in our furniture. There is a growing body of evidence that suggests that many of these flame retardants are ineffective and that they contain carcinogens and other harmful ingredients. This is an extremely broad brush that poses too many questions that cannot be answered in this forum today. However, the mattress industry has come up with a standard that has become nationwide. UL has developed the standard, and the mattress industry now has a product that is flame retardant without the use of chemicals. I would propose that this body maybe want to study that upholstered furniture might have to live up to the same standard, that the Office of Fire Prevention and Control be charged, as they were with the cigarette standard, to develop a standard for upholstered furniture that would match the one that is presently in place for mattresses in this country, that would seriously reduce the fire load in buildings. Buildings today are becoming fully involved, as we say in the fire service, before the first arriving engine because of the fire load. People in our business refer to furniture as solid gasoline in your home. Beneath that pretty covering they put on upholstery is nothing but plain foam, polyurethane foam, that is a carbon-based product that is very flammable. Not only does it burn, but it melts and it pools and it spreads, and it spreads the fire more rapidly. Buildings are becoming overwhelmed. The construction we're using today in buildings, the buildings are collapsing, and it's due to the fire load within the building and the construction type that's being involved. FASNY this year has adopted a program that we want to set some fire safety standards to save lives. One of them being the flammable, toy fire lighter bill that passed the Assembly last year, and we had trouble getting through the Senate. We want to look at upholstered furniture. We want to look at conditions in lightweight construction, and we also want to see that the building code in the state of New York that is being presently considered to be adopted, the ICC building code, retains the language that has residential sprinklers included in it, because the residential sprinklers will probably save more lives than any flame retardants that are included in furniture or anything else that's on the marketplace today. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. The goal of FASNY is not only to save property and lives, but to protect our firefighters as they go about their daily routine, fighting fires and addressing the problems that they face on a daily basis. And thank you very much for this hearing.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here. Let me